Hello, everyone, and welcome to our automated class enrollment maintenance, the open forum. This is now our fourth conversation around the entire class and enrollment maintenance topic. And we know we have some folks that have joined that have been part of our open office hours or maybe part of the overview. So how we'll handle the conversation today, we'll do a high-level introduction with the group for those that don't yet know us, and then we'll dive into an overview on the different tools, the reason behind why we started building them, etc. And then we'll flow into basically an open session where then y'all can ask us questions after seeing the tools, or if you've already been using the tools, what questions, what maybe issues you're having, that sort of thing. So we have our whole core design team here ready at your disposal to help answer whatever we can. We can do deep dives into business process, etc. Logistics, please feel free, leverage the Q&A box inside the UI. And then if we have really detailed questions, we can open up microphones. Just feel free, you can ask to have your mic opened and we can do that. But without further ado, let's get started. So my name is Chris Cameron. I'm an AVP within our higher ed Oracle practice. My background, I come from technology. I've done many years within PeopleSoft and technical architecture and all of that fun stuff. And I was one of our core designers, and I helped with some of the programming on the tool sets for class maintenance and enrollment maintenance. Bob?
Hi, I'm Bob Lawson. I've been in higher ed for the better part of 30 years, been working in campus solutions for the better part of 20. And my role here is the project manager. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. And Bob's helping us with a lot of the correspondence, and you'll find if you haven't already spoken to Bob, you probably will be, as he'll be one of your main point of contact interacting with us through this. And then we have Vicki Cooper. Vicki is one of our core student records consultants, and she's unable to be here with us today, but just wanted to give her a shout out. She helped quite significantly with a bit of the design and lots of great testing to help make sure that these things were fully vetted before we do code releases. Ken?
I'm Ken Epstein, and I'm a student records consultant, also do some advising. Been around for a long time, and I have been privileged to be part of this team to help design it, test it, watch it work. It's pretty neat and very exciting. Melissa?
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see some familiar names on this list. My name is Melissa Young, and my background is really student records, academic advisement, and some project management. And my role on this project was to, assist with my knowledge and the functional support for the design and testing of this product.
Thanks, Ken and Melissa. And then from our development team, we have Kevin Kelly, one of our core technical resources. He greatly helped us with the development around the class schedule maintenance piece that you'll see soon. And then we have Kelly Owens, and Kelly was the prime developer for the enrollment maintenance functionality. So they worked quite extensively. The entire team, many late nights, weekends. It was a lot of work to get the first iteration of the code out a couple weeks ago. And then we have another version that we're going to be releasing today at some point with some of the feature requests that we've received from institutions and colleges. So on that note, let's do a little dive into actually looking at the tool sets and what they're meant to do and how they could potentially benefit us. So when we started down this journey, gosh, I think it's been maybe a month and a half ago now when we started, we built a task force or a small group, and actually turned out to be a very large group of internal resources and consultants and management that was really interested in helping out the higher ed community around areas that we knew were going to be painful, specifically around the current pandemic and how it impacts our our fall and potentially our spring semesters, but also if we could build something that could be leveraged in the future as well. So let's try and hit some of the immediate items, but then let's also deliver something that could help long term. And we're pretty happy. We had some pilot schools that we worked through with some of our designs, and they gave us some feedback, and we added in some more functionality. And at the end of the day, what that left us with were two core pieces that we focused on, specifically around updates to the schedule of classes and then updates to enrollments. So the idea was, let's take a use case, for instance, around something that might impact us with fall, where we have students that have all registered for in-person classes, and now we have policy that says, okay, we can't have as many students per class. So what does that mean to us? So now we have our sections already built out, our scheduled classes already built out for the fall, but now we have to reduce the amount of enrollments and reduce the enrollment capacities, potentially create new sections, maybe change the instruction mode on the class section, et cetera. So the first piece of this functionality is specifically geared around the scheduled class maintenance, where we can make updates to the class sections, and then we can potentially even clone the class sections if we needed additional sections to handle the different enrollments. And then the second piece of functionality was around, okay, now that we have our sections that might have reduced capacities, how can we now select students that are over capacity and move them easily to additional sections? So those were the two core use cases that we leveraged. And we're gonna go through now, and I'll go into the actual web and we'll do a review on what that means. So we've developed free for institutions and colleges. The way to request these tools, we have a website within our Sierra-Cedar.com/HE-class-enrollment. This website is where you can go to request the tools. Again, they're completely free. This was our initiative to help out the community. On this website, please feel free, click the request, the free tools. From there, it will kick off the process where you'll be interacting with Bob, who you met earlier, and he'll send you an agreement to sign, send back the agreement, and then we'll send you the latest version of the tool sets. The current version that's been released is version 2C as in Charlie, but we do have a version 3A for alpha, which we're planning on releasing later today. And what we're going to start to look at is including all of the new features that we've built into the tool sets based on the feedback that we've received from the schools currently using it and our pilot schools. So with the tool sets, we have the two pieces that we discussed earlier, the class schedule maintenance and the class enrollment maintenance. Within the class schedule maintenance, the thought process was around being able to slice and dice your class sections. How do we identify what classes we need to interact with? And then once we've identified the classes, how do we make the changes that we need to make? So we're gonna just take a quick example. Let's look at psychology. I think we were looking at 498. We leveraged a search that's quite similar for those registrars and folks that work in the registrar's office. You may notice this search is very similar to what you'll see on the actual scheduled classes page itself. So we tried to mimic much of the functionality so it'll be easy to use. We did include some additional functionality specifically around instruction mode and also the % of enroll capacity, which is to help us to identify how full classes are. So we'll do an example in a moment specifically around the capacities, but for now, let's do a search on our 2207 term, which is our fall 2020 psychology 498. We'll click search. Oop, we've got nothing on 498. So let's back up and do a wider search. So specifically on psychology, what I get is a list in our class sections of all sections that are part of psychology for the term for fall. From this list, I can then start to say, okay, I want to look at our updating a section and I want to update, let's say, Psych 100, Section 2, Section 3. We can cancel the class. Maybe we want to drop our enrollment capacities. So we know that that classroom now, we can't have 35 students. We have to go down to, let's say, 20 students, for instance. Now that we've dropped to 20 students, we now, if we did have enrollments inside of that class, we might now be over capacity, so we might need to clone the section. So we'll talk about in a second. But for our updates, we're able to update our class association, our capacities, our waitlist capacities, and our instruction mode. We can also update facility, and this is a new feature that was requested. And what we can do is, if we didn't want to make any other changes to that class, but maybe we wanted to change the instruction mode from in-person to maybe virtual or internet, we could come in, change to internet. But now we also have to update the facility, and I want to clear out the facility code. So I can tell it, let's update the facility, let's clear it out. When I run this process, it's going to go through, and for every class that I told it to update, it's going to go make these changes. It uses a component interface against the scheduled classes, so all of the data integrity is maintained, etc. Now that's looking at one class in particular. Let's go and let's look at how we can apply defaults to all of them. So we have 92 sections that pulled up for this class. I want to update all of them. So I'm going to select all. I'm going to change my instruction mode to internet, and I want to clear all of the facilities. So I'm going to wipe out any facilities, and I'm going to apply that to selected. What that's going to do is it's going to update all the rows, and it's going to prep us so that when we run this, we can hit all of those sections in one fell swoop. So the idea is, how can we make some typical, we tried to take the 80-20 rule. What are the more likely items that folks are going to have to update, and how can we do it very quickly? And then we can run this process. It's going to leverage that component interface, and it's going to go make all those changes. Now, let's, for instance, take the use case where we dropped our enrollment capacity. And let's go back up and say, for section 2, I dropped my enrollment capacity from 35 down to 20, but now let's just pretend that the total enrollment was 35. So now we have 15 over. So now what I need to do is think about cloning. So over on this class sections tab, I can clone that, and I need one more section. I also have the ability, and this is also some new functionality that was requested around cloning meeting patterns, days, times, facility, instructors. I can also clone the meeting patterns. So I can say, okay, yes, let's clone the meeting patterns, let's clone the day times, and let's copy our instructors. When I run this, what will happen is we will clone section 2. If section 2 was part of a class association, so it shared an associated class with other sections, it will also clone the other sections. And we have the ability, if this was in a combined section, that we could also clone combined sections. So if this class was part of combined section, let's say 3, I could tell it, okay, also clone all the combined sections. So all of the sections that were part of combined section 3 would also get cloned. It would create combined section 4, or whatever the next combined section is, and it would move those new sections into that combined section. So that was another feature that a school had requested, and I believe that feature is part of 2 Charlie for those that have that functionality. So a couple things to note on this functionality. The associated class number is quite critical in how we link classes within the same catalog number. So for instance, we can see that section 1 and section 2 are within the same class association. So if I cloned section 2, it's also going to clone section 1 so that it maintains data integrity. So in case this was a lecture in a lab or a lecture discussion, it will bring over those additional sections so that the integrity is there for later enrollment purposes. Some other pieces that we have inside of this page, we have the ability to view our classes. So we can dive down into the detail of the class for each class. And we also, if there was a combined section, we would be able to, right here is an example of a combined section. We could also view the combined section detail here. Let's see, before I flow off from the schedule updates, Melissa or Ken, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so, Chris. I think you've done a pretty good job. You covered it all.
All right, I'll flip over to anthropology really quick because I believe we do. So I'm saying, give me all anthropology classes that are 50% or more enrolled based on the capacities, and we have 2. So here's an example of how we can leverage this field, because we may, for your fall term, you might only want to leverage this to identify classes that are over enrolled, or maybe you want to look for 100% enrolled. But if you're needing to drop class sizes in half, you could look at 50% enrolled to really zero in on which classes you might have to clone and then later move our enrollments. Melissa, did you have anything?
I think just to point out and echo your comment about associated class. So it is absolutely critical that you have clean associated classes assigned to your class schedule. And of course, we all know that we can't change that associated class number if we have enrollments in there. So it's a little bit of a little tricky thing to do on this time around. But certainly, we might plan for upcoming terms of how we're going to use this tool, in that we would want to first roll that class section and then clean up our associated classes if we need to, and then, do the cloning and whatnot. But be really careful on the associated class. I think we experienced it ourselves in our demo environment where we are testing and building. And I know that a couple of our initial schools have experienced it, where sometimes our associated classes, multiples of our classes have associated class 1, because we didn't update our associated class number. So you're going to have to look at your data and do some cleanup first, just so that we are not creating more of the bad associated class situations. So just a heads up on that, and there's information in the documentation, but just giving out a shout out warning.
Thanks, Melissa. So once we've potentially updated, excuse me, all of the sections that we needed to update, and we might have created new sections now. So let's say we clone some sections. We may now need to determine how you're going to handle your meeting pattern. So we added in all this meeting pattern functionality for cloning purposes, but you will more than likely still need to leverage your room scheduling software that you leverage. So you might be using AdAstra, you might be using Series 25, et cetera, whatever processes you run to map the facility ID and really fine tune those meeting patterns. But let's say we've now updated our classes, we've created new sections that we need to create. You now go run your scheduling software that you have. So now it really honed in the patterns. Now let's talk about actually the enrollment piece. So we may have classes now that are over enrolled. We may have classes that you have too many enrollments in them. So let's go in. So this is the next piece, the class enrollment maintenance. The search functionality is exactly the same. So we're going to go in, we're going to look for 2207, which is our fall 2020. I'm going to keep subject. Actually, I think we might even have, let's go back to our anthropology example. But I'm going to say, give me all of my classes or my sections that have 50% enrollment total. So we have an example. Oh, here's a really good one. We get our results, and we have here anthropology 1 and 2, section 3. This enrollment total is 9. Our capacity is 10. Let's say we wanted to reduce the amount of students in that class, so we're just going to select that class. The way we designed this page, and it's doing a lot of complex stuff, but we really tried to design it to be as simplistic as possible. So with that in mind, we took the concept of a source class section. So this was the class that we just selected from that select source class up at the top of the page. And you can navigate back and forth if you needed to refine what you wanted to select. When you select a different class, it'll push you over and it'll update this page accordingly. But let's look at our Anthropology 102. Section 3, where our enrollment total is 9, our capacity is 10. We could dive in and look at more detail of the class, or we can look at the actual roster. Now that we understand what our source class is going to be that we want to move enrollments out of, now let's start thinking about how we're going to select the students and then where we're going to move them to. So inside of this assignment options section, the first item is determining how many students to move. So we have options of moving all students. So this is a way, if you wanted to cancel a class, you could move all students out of it into other target classes. We can move only the override, the overcapacity enrollments. Right now we're under by 1, so this would not select anything, or we can move a specific number. So I could say, I'm gonna move 3. The next item is, okay, how do we determine which students? Now that we know the count on how many we want to move, how do we determine which ones to move? The first item is selecting the students by their last enroll date time. So the concept is the last students to enroll will be the first students that we move out. So last in, first out. The other is randomly selecting the students. So it has a randomizer and it will just randomly select however many students we decided to select. We're gonna say last in, first out. Then we need to determine how we're going to fill the next sections, because we could have multiple sections that we can be moving students into. And that really comes into play when we start thinking about time conflicts. If we want to try and optimize how we're moving the students, if we want to adhere to time conflicts and try to move students into classes that do not have time conflicts, then we may want to select multiple classes, but we might want to fill the next available section first, or we might want to evenly split between how many we can select. We're going to fill the next available section, and we really only have 1 target that we can move into because the other 2 are closed in this example. But back to the time conflicts, this is saying choose the class or select the class as long as there's not a time conflict. However, if all of the classes have a time conflict, then select the first one. That's essentially what this guy is doing. The next item is we can say exclude students from the selection criteria if they have a negative service impact based on enrollment. So that would mean if they have an impact for enroll, drop, swap, etc., exclude them. So do not select them. So for those students that we have specifically assigned an enrollment, a negative enrollment service indicator, exclude them from movement. So our target sections, now that we understand which students we want to select, how we want to split them up, we're now going to select our target section. For this example, the other 2 sections are closed, so we only have this one that we can move them into. And then the idea would be is let's preview what the enrollments are going to be. It takes our 3 that we said we want to move based on the last enrollment, try to not get any time conflicts, and it will select how the enrollments are going to work. And these are all swap enrollments. So it's going to be it leverages the delivered enrollment engine. It leverages delivered enroll rec headers and enroll rec details. So essentially what this process is going to do is it's going to give you the ability to override how these classes come out. So for Catherine, if we did not want her into class number 1677, let's pretend there were more sections that she could go into, we could select a different section. We could also override the action date. We could also add related classes. So if this class number had related classes, let's say it was a lecture and we had to select a lab and maybe we had to select a discussion, we could prep the items here by adding the row for a related class and selecting what the related class number is that we want them to move into. Then when the enrollment request is created, it'll do a swap from 1676 into 1677, and it'll also add the related class items. If it was an auto enroll, it'll drop because we're leveraging delivered functionality. It's going to drop all of the auto enrolled sections. If it's moving into a new auto enroll, it will auto enroll into all of the other sections. If it was coming from a related class with related sections, it will pre-populate for you new related sections. The only time that you really need to manually select the add related sections is if you're coming from an auto enroll and you're going to a related section, or if you're coming from a non-related section and moving to a related section. That's when you manually need to select what sections you want that student to move into. And whatever we select here, this is the data that's flowing into the enroll rec header and the enroll rec detail. And it's using mass enroll, so we can go look at exactly what gets created by this process. Let's pretend, for instance, we don't want William. We don't want to move William, so we can remove William here. So we can say, okay, we're only going to run 2 enrollment swaps. It's going to be for Catherine and Alyssa. We can run the process. After we run the process, let's just do that. What will happen if we sat inside of the process monitor page, when this process finishes, we're going to get an enroll rec ID, and it's going to let us know if there were any enroll detail errors. Let's go in, we'll see, it's still running. We'll give it a couple more seconds. So while that's going, a couple other features on this page. Again, we can review classes in detail by going to the view class. We can also view the rosters for that class. We're going to dive in. Good, it's done now. We're going to come back out. We can see that the enroll rec ID is here. This data shows back up once the process finishes and you refresh the page, and it tells us there's an error count of 2. I have a feeling that there's probably related classes that we need, and there are. So for both of these students, they needed related classes. So the lectures had a lab. Now, if I reran this, we would more than likely see that the error count is down to a 0, and then we could go look and we will see that these swapped requests are successful. Once we process one class, we can then move back, rerun our search, process the second class, etc. And we would tick through our classes one at a time as we're mass moving enrollments. Ken and Melissa, are there any details you'd like to add?
Just a few to point out, and it'll actually answer Amy's question that she had posed. So these enrollment requests are swaps, and in the documentation, we do give you a list of all of the overrides and their whether those flags are yes or no. We do identify each one of those. Once the students have landed in this preview grid, that is the enrollment request that is being processed. So this is where you'll want to make sure that you take the students out, or make sure that those associated classes or the related classes are stated. But once the students are in the preview section, we assume that they are going to be somewhat forced into that new section. It's because we're taking the assumption that they were already enrolled and we are migrating them to a new class number. So we assume that because they were already enrolled in that initial source class, they must have met all of their prereqs, pre and co-reqs to get into that original class. So we are migrating them to a new class number per se. What I do want to point out is that there are a couple of additional functionalities up there. Well, one more. Underneath the attempt to resolve time conflicts, we have that in exclude negative service indicator, and that accounts for just the ENR service impacts. So all of our IENR, CENR, WENR, those are the enrollment impacts. And if you want to exclude students who may have an enrollment impact service indicator, you can check that box on, and those students will never populate into that grid down below. So they would be naturally excluded from the mass enrollment process, as opposed to having them error out when we're trying to process the mass enroll.
Thanks, Melissa. And let's see, the question that we had from Amy, this was are you able to move enrollments where there's a pre-co-rec on the class? Was the question. And I believe Melissa answers yes, because we perform all of the overrides because we're working with the assumption. And it's actually, sorry, let me correct that. It's not all of the overrides. We have it documented which overrides are turned on inside of the user guide that we send with the code. So you can review those.
This is Ken again. The general philosophy on the overrides was that if the student got into the class in the first place, the student should get into this class that we're moving the student to. So those are how we pick the overrides.
Thanks. We did have another question on the faculty workload.
Yes,
specifically,
Ken, I just tested it. I had never tested that.
So,
it turns out it copies the workload exactly. So if somebody had a 3-credit course and we copied those, and that was 100% load factor, 33% FTE. The new section has that same instructor with a 3-credit workload and another 33% added to their workload. So it doesn't touch the percentages or the workload limits or any of that sort of stuff. It copies it exactly.
okay, thanks, Ken. We do have another question. How are the target class sections populated? Is it choosing all sections that have the same course ID? Yes, the target class sections, it's essentially within the same course ID. It will show us all of the sections and it will let us move students into sections that are open. And actually, I think it might be, Melissa, Ken, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe it's based on the component as well. So if it was an enrolled lab, for instance, the target class sections would be showing the associated enrollment lab sections in the target. Or in our example that we're looking at now, it's a lecture.
Yeah,
Correct.
so you're seeing that, yeah. Yes, it would show everything. So you can, and then we can pick the associated class if you want to. But that's what that, the related class checkbox, if we had a lecture lab, it would show them there.
Excellent. And let me, so please feel free as we keep moving forward, if you have more questions, we're anticipating that we'll probably dive back into these pages. There are lots and lots of questions that we've received in the past sessions that we've had, so please feel free. We have a new question from Joanne. If it's a swap function, will this work if the target class is in a different session?
Oh, Vicky tested that and we got some fairly bizarre results, if I remember correctly.
With different sessions?
She had different sessions, but she had different components in different sessions. It acted weird. A nice clean swap from session to session. My guess is that that would work.
That would be a good item probably for us to verify though. So we can take that as an action item. We'll take a look to see, let's say for instance, if we're in a regular session and then we're trying to, if it's even possible to target a different session.
You know, the enrollment request doesn't have the session on it, does it? I don't think it does. Because if it doesn't, then the session wouldn't matter. Since we're essentially mimicking.
Yeah, it's an interesting use case though. It's the first one I've heard because I could totally see why we might be wanting to push students out to a later session. So we can, but we need to confirm that our target class sections allow it and that it's not keyed by session. Do you know what I mean? So we'll have to pop the code open and take a look at that if it's keying to session. Yep, we can take that offline. So we'll get back to you on that one, Joanne. Thank you for that. So there's a follow-up. We have a regular session and an online session, and we couldn't use swap to move students when we had to move students in our spring term. Gotcha. So we have another question, Perry, welcome back. Schedule of classes maintenance is decentralized at my institution. For the schools using the bolt-on or planning to, will you do so in a centralized fashion, limiting use to a few specialized users in the registrar's office, or release in a decentralized fashion to course department schedulers? So that's a really good question. And one of the very first highlights inside of the user guide, we did not build into this functionality the ACAD.org security. It's much more high level, and it's so I think it depends on your institution how you want to allow users to make changes. Because if you are decentralized, theoretically then different departments are going to have access to view and change different departments' data. There's not currently that row level security tied into this functionality. So that would be a decision to make at your campus. We have another question from Vanessa. Just to clarify, when you clone a class that has a related class, does it leverage the auto create from the class association and create all course components? Yes, it does. It will create all related classes and components that are linked to that class. And we've been, that's actually been one item that has been impacting some of the schools that have been using this so far. And we updated our documentation to hopefully make it a little bit clearer. Let's go back in. I think we had, there we go. Here's an example. So when we are cloning, it will, let's take, let me find one that's got, so here's Psych 100. If we're doing an update and we're wanting to clone at the same time, the trick or the key to this, if you're saying, let's update the enroll capacities for both of these to 10, let's maybe change the instruction mode to internet. When we come over to the clone step, make sure to only, because these are both inside of the same associated class, make sure to only clone one of them. It doesn't matter which one you clone, but only clone one because it will clone all related classes to that item by only cloning one of them, if that makes sense. And then whatever properties we set for the meeting times, copy instructors, if it was combined, etc., it would also create it would clone the combined sections that's associated to, if we had this row to item number 2.
Hey,
Chris,
Chris.
speaking of copying meeting patterns, we should warn people that you can't copy the meeting days and times and the facility at the same time because it'll create a conflict and the system won't let you do that. So pick either facility or meeting times, but not both. The process actually runs to success, but you won't get a new section because the CI won't let you do it.
And for that item, we're debating putting in an edit in this next release before we send it out to help with that usability item to make it a little bit easier. We'll make it so that you can't select both of these boxes here, and we'll give a little message. Vanessa has a follow-up. The principle of cloning, so does that principle apply to how we move the enrollments? When we are moving enrollments, because it's a swap, if the enrollment originally had related classes or auto-enroll classes, if you're going from auto-enroll to auto-enroll, it will swap from all of the original auto-enroll into all of the new auto-enroll. If you're going from a class that had related classes and you swap to another class that has related classes, it will help you and it will automatically select the related classes for you that then you can override. If you are going from auto enroll, and this is where it's a little confusing, if you're going from auto enroll to related, or you're going from a non-related into a related, you need to manually select your related classes, like what I'm doing right now. So at the end of this, once we save and run, it will now, for this new swap, it will tie together the additional related classes. Does that help answer your questions, Vanessa? And I believe that is documented in our user guide as well. Okay, excellent. Okay, let's, please feel free, keep your questions coming. In addition, we have, I'm gonna drop back to, actually, let's go back up to here. We have, so on our website is the way to request the tools, again, completely free. Please leverage if you think this is beneficial, please take advantage of it. We have had 3 other sessions now specifically on this topic. This original overview goes into much, much more depth than what I went into quickly now. So please feel free, the playback is there. We have also had 2 office hour sessions on this exact conversation where other institutions and colleges have been asking questions. You can review those playbacks and see what other institutions and colleges have been asking. And from this website as well, we'll be linking out to the final posting from the Hug Open Forum that we're doing right now. All right, let's dive back into our deck. So to date, we have had 4 sessions. We're at our last open forum session. We don't currently have plans for another webinar, but if we continue or if we receive lots of questions or a topic that we think might be good to be shared with everyone, or if we get feedback that we need another office hours, maybe in another few weeks, please let us know. We'd welcome that feedback and we can more than happily have another office hours if that's going to benefit folks. So let's open it up to our open discussion now. Again, please feel free, leverage the Q&A chat, or if you'd like, I believe you can raise your hand or ask to have your mic opened if you have a more in-depth question, and we can dive into your question. We can go back into the webpage and we can do some specific use cases that you might have. We have our full team here to help you however we can. And on that note, how many here have started to deploy the tool? So either in your test or in your production instances. Feel free, leverage the raise your hand functionality. Okay, so it looks like we've got a lot of new. Let's see. And Perry, since we've seen you quite often, thank you very much, by the way. Do you have any feedback or stories for have your end users started to use it yet, or are you still in the dev test instances? Okay, so they are still in dev. I believe we've had confirmation, Bob, I think we've received feedback from 1 or 2 schools that have already moved this into production. And I think they were leveraging the 2 Charlie, which was the last release. It didn't include the new features around the facility ID updates or the meeting pattern updates, but they have been using this. And Perry's just letting us know that functional users have started looking at it. Okay, thank you, Perry. For the others that are here on the line, since this may be the first time that we're having this conversation with you, do you have any feedback on any pain points that these tools would not be helping you with, or some added functionality or feedback that you'd like to give us. It's always great to hear you know, so many folks have different twists to how they've configured their data or how they're leveraging their schedule. Knowing the different angles really helps us, because again, we designed and built this, you know, of course, leveraging our experience with all the institutions we worked with, but we built it within our demo environment. So, you know, there's only so much data that we've had to work with. Maybe what we can do, let's flow in, let me show the user guide, which if you request the code, once you get it, with the guide, with the code comes this user guide. Pieces of the user guide to take note: when you first receive the guide, inside of the installation information, this is the start to finish, step-by-step how to deploy this in your dev instance for your technical team. So we tried to make this as simplistic and quick and easy as possible, starting with the installation information, which is on page 19. But that gets really, really techy. So maybe what we'll do is let's dive into more of the functionality perspectives. And Melissa or Ken, are there any areas you'd like to call out specifically, maybe within tips or tricks as we're going through and using these tools?
So, hi everyone, it's Melissa. So I think the important things here are just to understand what this tool will, and you know, what are the areas that we are and are not addressing. So this tool is really for trying to help minimize the amount of time our schedulers and our registrar's offices may be spending to either create those additional sections or make one or two field changes to existing sections, or having to move students from one section to another. So it's addressing those two critical areas of trying to reduce the amount of time we are spending with our Campus Solutions product of just pure inserting the rows or updating the values. What it does not address is the interconnection, the work that needs to happen, the integration work that needs to happen with your classroom scheduling functionality. And so, you know, whether it be Schedule 25 or Ad Astra, you still need to work with that product to make sure that, you know, you're not creating any issues on the facilities. And it doesn't address that, you know, the overall questions about, you know, what about the instructor workloads? How do we manage that? How do we get, you know, the communications out to students? So you still have to think about all those other steps in addition to what you're having to do now. So we're just hoping that we can just reduce the amount of time that you're having to spend in those two components. What it will do is help us to, you know, make those updates. So let's say you have all English or all history, which can definitely, you know, which can be taught via Zoom or online. If all we had to do was change the instruction mode to internet or virtual, and you had 100 sections, you know, why spend hours trying to change that one field when we can do so in just a couple of minutes in this component? So that's what really the purpose of this one. So be sure to take a look at the background. Again, pointing out that we are not looking at the academic org security. So just be cognizant of that and release this functionality out to those folks who have that overall view. The other thing about this documentation is I put in quite a few of like watch outs or informational. So it's got the little eye with the, it's, Chris, if you can scroll down a little bit, I can show an example. I think it's on the next page. One more. Okay, so there will be these informationals or cautions out there. So please pay attention to those. Make sure that you're taking a look at them, you know, especially things around the class associations or what the App Engine is doing, we've tried our best to make sure that we remembered, because sometimes it's gone quite fast, to make sure that we include all of those little components in there. And then Chris, if you'll scroll down to the bottom portion of the functional area before we get into the technical aspects of it, and just a few more pages. Right, Pat, go back up, right there. So here's the list of the enrollment override settings we're invoking during the swap functionality. So just being aware of what those settings are and make sure that you're okay with those. The beauty of this is that once we release it out to you and it's in your system, if you wanted to go in and make an update to one of those enrollment override settings and make a yes to a no or a no to a yes, you absolutely have the capability to do that, because once it's in your system, this product is yours to do whatever you need to do.
Thanks, Melissa. And I know we're running up close to the hour. Ken, did you have any items? I see we have some feedback from Perry on potentially adding updates to start end times, which would be a great help. So we'll take that into consideration. Thanks for that, Perry.
I was just getting ready to test moving students from one session to another. Let me run it and see if it runs.
Ah, great. Yeah,
I'll have that for. I just hit the run button. But the other thing,
I can bounce into that really quick. What's
okay? It's math
subject?
452.
Okay.
And since we didn't have anything rather than session one, I created a 12-week session class just to see what happened. And it hasn't finished yet.
Okay, so you're trying to do the 12 weeks.
I'm trying to load into there, yep. And I just tried to move 5 students out of section 1, I think, which is the one that has all the students. Yes, what I wanted to point out when I started to do this, it reminded me, and I don't remember whether you mentioned this or not, Chris, that when you do the search, you only see classes in which there are enrollments. You won't see any empty classes. So it ran to success, and it said 0 errors. So we just moved somebody from the regular section to the 12-week section. We moved 5 of them. And we should be able to, does this update the roster? Or do I have to research? I can't remember.
What run control are you using?
So there we are. Oh, I can't show you. I need to show it to you.
Yeah, what run control?
I'm looking at it myself, thinking everybody can watch. So go to the class enrollment maintenance, and you ought to be able to see this, right?
Yeah, if you just let me know what your run control is.
Oh, my run control, it's Ken_ENRL.
Got it. Thank you.
There you go.
Here we are. There we are.
Yep, there they are. And if you click on the class roster there on 12.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, you'll see there are the 5
There they
students that I moved. So it worked.
Good deal.
That was fun.
Chris, one more question, Lori. Noticed that it was for tools versions 8.5.6 and 8.5.7, but they're still on 8.5.5. Has anyone retrofitted this to earlier tools version?
So yes, we have heard. So inside of the installation document, we have some quick little instructions on specifically how to get it to import into prior versions. And let me just show that in the little call out. So what you need to do is edit your, and this is for the technical folks, we can edit the tools release version inside of the project document. And from there, you would set it to 8.5.5, for instance. But we have heard some folks have had success in 8.5.5. What may be different is if schools are on different possibly PUM releases, or if they're still on 9.0 and they're on a different bundle release, the component interfaces might need to be validated. And I do believe we have a step inside of the instructions here to validate the component interfaces so that we make sure that it is properly set for whatever your app version is. But once we are through with those 2 items, you should be good to go. We just have not tested it fully internally ourselves, which is why we weren't saying it was working in 855 or even in Campus Solutions 9.0. But we have heard that folks have been trying that out. And I know we've got 3 minutes left. I saw one other question that we had. For clone classes, is it problematic to exactly copy faculty workload? That's a good question, and probably more from the business perspective. Melissa, Ken, any comments on that?
That's what it does. And when I tried it, it occurred to me that just because I've got a new section that I've got to teach doesn't mean that I should be getting less credit for that section. So I've used faculty workload, help people set it up. So I don't think that that's a problem. However, as Melissa pointed out and as Chris pointed out, we're not trying to answer every possible question. So we made some decisions that we thought were sensible from our experience, and we hope we guessed right.
Yeah,
I was not disappointed to see it copy exactly.
And
Right.
for your institution, if that's not the way you want to work it, there's always the option not to leverage that functionality by not turning it on as you're doing the clone, or having a step to go back through after to do some tweaks to the data.
Or even better, before you start, take your source class and set the faculty workload that you want for all of the clones there, and then you'll get the new workload. So if you wanted to set them all to 0.5, or say you wanted to make 4 copies of the one and you wanted to make them all 0.25, do it on the original, and then you'll get 4 classes with 0.25.
Great, thanks,
Just
Ken.
copy the original. And
for our feedback, if y'all do have any additional feedback, please feel free to reach out to robert.lawson@Sierra-Cedar.com. We welcome all feedback, and we've been reviewing everything that's come our way. So please feel free, reach out to us. Let's see, we did just get another question come in. Is there a classic page version of the run controls? We are in 9.2 without Fluid. So this is actually all in classic. It is not in Fluid. What you noticed that was Fluid was just Fluid navigation. So you are totally fine using these tools if you're fully on Fluid. If you're not on Fluid and you're still in classic, you're absolutely fine as well. With their administrative pages, so we built them in classic.
You know, and we might want to add that there is an institution that is attempting to deploy this even in Campus Solutions 9.0.
Yep.
We have not heard back at their success.
Great, thanks, Bob. And on that note, we are at the top of the hour. Just wanted to thank everyone so much for your time. You know, we're here to help assist y'all however we can. So please feel free, reach out to us. If there's anything else we can do to help, just let us know. Thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your morning or afternoon.
And the HUG would like to thank all of you for putting on today's webinar. Again, the recording and slides will be available tomorrow in the HUG Online archives. While you're there, make sure to check out the upcoming webinar schedule. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.